Rain fell in steady sheets over the city, turning sidewalks into shallow rivers and streetlights into blurry halos in the mist. It was the kind of cold that seeped through layers, the kind that made even people with warm coats hurry home with their heads down. But near the corner of Maple and Fifth, a teenage girl stood under the awning of a closed bookstore, shivering in a hoodie 2 sizes too big and sneakers with holes near the toes. Her socks were soaked. Her stomach had stopped growling hours ago. It had given up. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning when a kind street vendor gave her half a sandwich after seeing her eyeing his cart for nearly an hour. She'd slept in a bus shelter, curled up on a bench with her backpack as a pillow, waking every time a car passed too loudly. Now, with night falling and the temperature dropping, she knew she couldn't go another day like this, not without something warm in her belly, not without hope. She walked slowly down the block, hands shoved deep in her pockets, eyes scanning the storefronts. Most places were closing, lights flicking off, chairs being stacked on tables. But one restaurant stayed bright. Bella Luna. An Italian place with dark wood trim, white tablecloths, and through the large front window, a grand piano sitting near the back, untouched. Gleaming under soft golden light, she stopped. She'd seen pianos before, in music stores. In school auditoriums she'd never been allowed to enter. But this one looked alive, like it was waiting. Her fingers twitched at her sides. She hadn't played in months. Not since the shelter lost funding and sold off the old keyboard they kept in the common room. But before that, before everything fell apart, she used to play every chance she got. Her mom taught her on a second-hand keyboard they'd found at a flea market for $20. Music doesn't care how much money you have, her mom used to say. It only cares if you're honest with it. Now, standing in the rain, that memory felt like a lifetime ago. She took a deep breath and stepped toward the restaurant door. The warmth hit her the moment she opened it. Smells of garlic, tomatoes, fresh bread wrapping around her like a blanket. A few diners glanced up, then quickly looked away. She knew what they saw. Wet clothes, tangled hair, the kind of person most places ask to leave. But she didn't come to beg for cash. She came with an offer. The hostess, a woman with a neat bun and a polite smile, approached. "Can I help you?" The girl swallowed. Her voice came out quieter than she wanted. I don't want to cause trouble. Is that piano yours?" The hostess followed her gaze. "It belongs to the restaurant, yes. Could I play it just for 5 minutes?" The hostess blinked. "You want to play the piano?" "Yeah, and if people like it, maybe someone would buy me a plate of food. Just one meal. I'll leave right after." A silence stretched. The hostess glanced toward the kitchen, uncertain. From behind the bar, the owner appeared, a man in his 50s with tired eyes and flour still dusting his apron. He'd overheard. He studied the girl, the way she held herself, not with shame but with quiet dignity. Something about her reminded him of his younger self, arriving in this country with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. He walked over. "You know how to play?" She nodded. "Since I was 6. You ever played a grand piano before?" "No," she admitted. "But I know the notes." He looked at the piano, then back at her. He thought about saying no, about protecting his space, his customers, his peace. But then he remembered the first meal someone ever gave him when he had nothing, just a bowl of soup and a "you'll be okay" that kept him going for weeks. "All right," he said finally. 5 minutes. If anyone complains, you stop." Relief washed over her so strong she almost swayed. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded to the hostess. "Clear a small table near the piano, and bring a glass of water." She walked toward the piano like she was walking on glass, careful, reverent. She wiped her damp hands on her jeans, then sat on the bench. The leather was cool. The keys were smooth, ivory white, perfect. She placed her fingers gently on them, feeling the familiar shape, the quiet promise beneath. Around her, the restaurant kept moving, waiters carrying plates, couples laughing softly, but a few people turned to watch. Curious, skeptical, maybe even annoyed. She didn't look at them. She closed her eyes and then, with a breath that felt like her first in days, she began to play. It wasn't Chopin. It wasn't Beethoven. It was a simple melody her mother used to hum while folding laundry or stirring soup. A tune with no name. Just feeling. Slow. Tender. Full of love and loss and the kind of quiet strength that doesn't need words. The first note rang out clear and soft, like a single drop of rain hitting still water. At the nearest table, a man paused mid-bite. At the bar, a woman stopped scrolling on her phone. From the kitchen doorway, the owner froze, spoon in hand. Because this wasn't just playing. This was remembering. This was surviving. This was a heart speaking when words had failed. And in that moment, no one thought about her wet shoes or her thin hoodie. They just listened. 5 minutes hadn't even passed, but something had already changed. The first few notes hung in the air like breath held too long. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the clink of silverware stopped. It was as if the whole restaurant had leaned in, not with judgment, but with something closer to wonder. She didn't open her eyes. She didn't need to. Her fingers knew this song like they knew the shape of her own bones. It wasn't written down anywhere. Her mother never used sheet music. She'd made it up one winter when the heat had been shut off and they'd huddled under blankets. The only warmth coming from the old space heater and the sound of that melody drifting from the tiny keyboard in the corner. It started slow, just a few notes in the left hand, low and steady, like a heartbeat. Then the right hand joined, soft and rising like someone reaching for light. There were no fancy runs, no dramatic flourishes, just truth. And somehow that was enough. At a corner table, a woman who'd been arguing with her husband about bills just minutes before felt her throat tighten. She looked at his hands, rough from work, always trying to fix things, and remembered the first time he held hers. The music didn't remind her of that moment exactly, but it made her feel it again. Near the window, an older man eating alone set down his fork. He hadn't touched his wine in 10 minutes. His wife had passed 3 years ago, and he came here every Friday because it was their favorite place. He hadn't played the piano since her funeral, but now listening to this girl, barefoot, soaked, playing like she had nothing to lose, he felt something stir in his chest that he thought was gone for good. In the kitchen, the owner stood frozen, spoon still in hand. He'd expected noise, maybe a clumsy attempt at Fur Elise or a pop song. Not this. This was intimate. Like she'd opened a door no one asked to see inside of. He glanced at his staff. Dishwashers paused at the sink, line cooks peeking through the pass, and saw the same look on all their faces. Quiet awe. She played on. Her fingers weren't perfect. Once she missed a note, a tiny stumble in the third phrase. But instead of stopping or flinching, she let it hang there, imperfect, human. And then she kept going, weaving the mistake into the next measure like it belonged. That's when the first tear fell. It came from the woman at table 4, the one who'd been scrolling through job rejection emails on her phone before the music started. She didn't wipe it away. She just let it roll down her cheek, her eyes fixed on the girl at the piano as if seeing something she hadn't realized she'd been missing. The melody began to swell, not louder, but deeper. The left hand grew more insistent, like a memory pushing through fog. The right hand answered with a question, then a plea, then a kind of surrender. It wasn't sad, exactly. It was honest. The kind of honesty that only comes when you've got nothing left to hide. A waiter who'd been about to clear a nearby table stood still, tray in hand, eyes glistening. He thought of his little sister back home, struggling in school, feeling invisible. He pulled out his phone and texted her. "You matter. I love you." He didn't even know why he did it. The music just made him want to say it. Outside, the rain kept falling. But inside, time seemed to slow. She reached the part of the song where her mother used to sing wordlessly, a high floating line that felt like a lullaby for grown-ups. Her fingers moved with more confidence now, not because she was showing off, but because she was finally home, not in a house, not in a bed, but in the music, in the memory, in the act of giving something real when she had almost nothing. And that's when it happened. From the back of the room, a soft sob broke the silence. Then another. Not loud, not dramatic. Just the quiet sound of people feeling something they hadn't let themselves feel in a long time. Grief, gratitude, loneliness, love. All tangled together in the spaces between the notes, the owner finally moved. He set the spoon down gently and walked toward the dining room, not to stop her, but to listen closer. He stood near the hostess station, arms crossed, but his usual stern expression was gone. In its place was something raw, like he was seeing his own past in her hands. She didn't rush the ending. She let the music breathe, let it fade like a sunset. The final chord was soft, almost a whisper, and when it ended, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, of breath held, of tears unshed, of hearts cracked open just a little. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, from the bar, someone clapped. Just once. That was all it took. The whole room erupted, not in wild cheers, but in warm, steady applause. People stood, not because it was expected, but because they couldn't stay seated. A man wiped his eyes with his napkin. A young couple held hands under the table. The older man by the window nodded slowly, like he'd just been handed a gift he didn't know he needed. She opened her eyes, and for the first time that night, she saw them, not as strangers, not as people who might turn her away, but as people who had listened. Really listened. Her hands trembled in her lap. Not from cold anymore, but from the weight of what had just happened. She hadn't planned this. She hadn't practiced this performance. She'd just played what was in her heart, and somehow it had reached theirs. The owner walked over. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her, really looked like he was seeing not just a hungry girl, but a person with a story, with history, with worth. Then he turned to the kitchen. "Maria," he called, "bring out the lasagna special, and garlic bread, and a slice of tiramisu." He looked back at her. "You're eating tonight." She opened her mouth to thank him, but no words came. So she just nodded, tears finally spilling over. But the night wasn't over. As the staff moved to prepare her meal, something else began to happen. A woman at table 6 stood and walked over, holding her coat. "You'll catch cold in that wet hoodie," she said gently, draping the warm wool over the girl's shoulders. A man from the bar left a $20 bill on the piano bench with a note. "For your next meal. And the one after." And from a corner table, an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes waited until the girl sat down at the small table they'd cleared for her. Then she approached slowly, holding out a small card. "I used to teach piano at the community college," she said softly. "If you ever want to learn more, or just have a place to practice, call me." The girl took the card with shaking hands. On it was a name, a phone number, and a simple message written in neat cursive. "Music needs voices like yours." She looked around the room, faces no longer distant, but open, kind, connected. 5 minutes. That's all she'd asked for. But in those 5 minutes, something shifted, not just for her, but for everyone who heard her play. Because sometimes, the most powerful music isn't the loudest, it's the truest. And on a rainy night in a city full of strangers, one girl's honesty became a kind of grace that fed more than just her hunger. The lasagna arrived steaming, layered with rich tomato sauce, melted cheese, and fresh basil. The garlic bread was golden and crisp, the tiramisu dusted with cocoa like snow on quiet earth. She stared at the plate for a long moment, not because she didn't want to eat. Her stomach had started growling again the second the smell hit her, but because it felt too much. Too kind, too sudden. She hadn't expected this. She'd come in asking for a chance, not a feast. Not warmth. Not kindness that looked her in the eye, but the owner just nodded toward the food. "Eat," he said gently. "You've earned it." She picked up the fork with hands that still trembled slightly. The first bite was almost too much, warm, savory, real. She closed her eyes, and for a second she was back in her old kitchen, her mother stirring a pot on the stove, humming that same melody. The memory was sharp, sweet, and aching all at once. Around her, the restaurant slowly returned to its rhythm. Diners talking again, waiters moving between tables, but the air felt different, lighter, softer. People glanced her way, not with suspicion, but with quiet respect. A few even offered small smiles. She ate slowly, savoring each bite like it might be her last. But halfway through, she noticed something else. The piano bench was empty, but the space around it wasn't. A couple had moved their dessert table closer just to sit near it. A young man pulled out his phone and showed his friend a short video he'd recorded, just the last minute of her playing. The camera shaky, but the emotion clear. She looked away, suddenly shy. Then the elderly woman, the one who'd given her the card, approached again, this time with a cup of tea. "Chamomile," she said, setting it down. "It helps after a long day." "Thank you," the girl whispered. The woman didn't sit, but she lingered. "You play like someone who's lived," she said simply, "not like someone showing off." That's rare. The girl didn't know how to respond, so she just said, "My mom taught me to play what I feel, not what I think people want to hear." The woman smiled. She was wise. They were quiet for a moment. Rain still tapped against the windows, but inside, it felt like a different world. After she finished eating, every bite, even the crumbs of bread, she stood to leave. She folded the borrowed coat neatly and handed it back to the woman who'd given it to her. "Thank you," she said again, voice thick. But as she turned toward the door, the owner stopped her. "You don't have to go out there tonight," he said, nodding toward the storm. "We've got a storage room upstairs. It's not fancy, but it's dry. And locked. You can stay till morning." She hesitated. Trust didn't come easy after months on the streets. But something in his eyes, steady, calm, no pity, made her nod. He led her up a narrow back staircase to a small room with a cot, a blanket, and a space heater humming softly in the corner. "Bathroom's down the hall," he said. "And if you need anything, knock on the kitchen door." She didn't cry until the door closed behind her. Then, wrapped in the blanket, stomach full for the first time in days, she let the tears come, not just from relief, but from the shock of being treated like a person again. The next morning, sunlight streamed through a high window. She woke to the smell of coffee and fresh bread drifting up from below. She washed her face, combed her hair with her fingers, and went downstairs. The restaurant was quiet, just staff prepping for lunch. The owner saw her and handed her a to-go box. "Leftover pasta," he said, "and a sandwich for later." She thanked him, but before she left, she asked, "Can I come back just to practice? I won't disturb anyone. I'll come early before you open." He thought for a moment. "How about this? You come at 10. We're closed till noon. You can have the piano for an hour. And if you're hungry, there's always soup." Her eyes lit up. "Really?" "Really." That became the new rhythm. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she showed up at 10 sharp, clean clothes, hair tied back, backpack slung over one shoulder. She'd play for an hour, sometimes the song from that night, sometimes new pieces she found in library books, sometimes just improvising, letting her fingers wander where her heart led. The staff got used to her. The dishwasher would leave a cup of hot chocolate on the piano bench. The hostess saved her a seat by the window on cold days. And the owner? He'd often stand in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, listening, not like a boss, but like someone remembering why he loved this place in the first place. One afternoon, the elderly woman returned. She sat quietly through the whole hour, then waited until the girl finished. "I've been thinking," she said. "There's a community music program that offers free lessons to young people in need. They have practice rooms, teachers, even performance opportunities. I'd like to recommend you." The girl's heart jumped. "But I don't have an address or a phone." "I'll handle that," the woman said. "All you need is your hands and your honesty." A week later, she walked into a small building downtown with piano-shaped windows and soundproof doors. It smelled like wood polish and old books. A kind-faced man showed her to a practice room with a well-tuned upright. "This one's yours whenever you need it," he said. She sat down, played the same melody from that rainy night, and for the first time she didn't feel like she was borrowing time. She felt like she belonged. Back at the restaurant, word had spread. Regulars started asking, "Is she playing today?" Tourists who'd seen the viral clip, a diner had posted it online with her permission, came hoping to hear her. But she never performed on demand. She only played when she needed to, when the music asked to be heard. One evening, as she packed up after practice, the owner handed her an envelope. Inside was a bus pass, good for a month. "So you don't have to walk in the rain," he said. She didn't say much, just tucked it into her backpack like a treasure. But the real change wasn't in the meals or the coat or the bus pass. It was in the way she held herself now, shoulders back, eyes clear, voice steady when she spoke. It was in the way she looked at the piano, not as an escape, but as a home. And it was in the way the people around her stopped seeing a street kid and started seeing a musician, a student, a friend. No one promised her a future that night, but they gave her something just as important, a chance to believe she deserved one. And sometimes that's all it takes to turn a single note into a whole new song. The video clip spread faster than anyone expected. It wasn't flashy, just shaky phone footage of a girl in a wet hoodie playing piano in a quiet restaurant. The camera focused on her hands, then panning up to show tears on strangers' faces. No music overlay, no dramatic captions, just raw, real emotion. Someone posted it with the title, "She asked to play for a meal. She gave us all something we didn't know we needed." Within days, it had hundreds of thousands of views. Then millions. News outlets picked it up. Not the big national ones, but local stations, community blogs, even a few international features. They called it the 5-minute miracle or the song that fed a soul. Comments poured in. I cried at work watching this. This restored my faith in people. Who is she? Is she okay? At first, she didn't know any of it was happening. She was too busy showing up at the music center every morning, practicing scales, learning new pieces, meeting with the retired teacher who'd become her unofficial mentor. The woman didn't just teach her technique. She taught her how to read music properly, how to shape a phrase, how to listen to the silence between notes. Music isn't just sound, she'd say. It's space. It's breath. It's what you leave out that matters as much as what you play. Then one afternoon, the owner of the restaurant pulled her aside. People are asking about you, he said gently. Reporters, donors, even a school. She froze. I don't want fame, she said quickly. I just want to play. I know, he replied. And no one's asking you to be famous. But some good might come from this if you're open to it. He showed her a letter from a local community college. They'd seen the video. They wanted to offer her a scholarship, not just for music, but for full tuition, books, even a small housing stipend if she'd enroll in their arts program. There was a catch. She'd need a legal guardian to sign the paperwork. Her heart sank. I don't have anyone. But the retired teacher stepped in. I'll do it, she said without hesitation. If you'll let me, it wasn't adoption. It wasn't even official foster care. Just a quiet agreement between two people who'd found each other through music. The woman had lost her own daughter years ago to illness, and in this girl's quiet strength she saw a chance to give something meaningful again. And the girl who'd spent so long feeling invisible finally had someone who saw her, not as a story, not as a symbol, but as a person worth believing in. With that support, everything began to shift. She moved out of shelters and into a small spare room in the woman's apartment, a tidy place filled with books, plants, and an old upright piano in the living room. For the first time in years, she had a key to a door, a bed that was hers, a fridge with food that didn't come from a dumpster or a donation line. She started classes that fall, not just piano, but music theory, history, even basic writing and math to fill gaps from years of missed schooling. She worked hard, sometimes staying up late with flashcards, sometimes practicing until her fingers ached, but she never complained. Because now every note felt like a step forward, not just a way to survive. Back at the restaurant, things changed too. The owner started hosting quiet music nights once a month. No cover charge, just soft lighting, good food, and local musicians playing for the love of it. The girl played at the first one, not as a spectacle, but as part of the community. She chose a piece she'd written herself, a simple composition called Rain and Bread, inspired by that first night. People listened the same way they had before, quietly, deeply, with hearts open. Afterward, a young boy, maybe 10 years old, approached her, holding a crumpled drawing. I made this for you, he said shyly. It showed a girl at a piano, rain outside, but inside the room was glowing with golden light. At the bottom, he'd written, You made my mom stop crying. She kept that drawing taped to her bedroom wall. Donations came in, not just money, but instruments for the music center, scholarships for other kids, even a new keyboard for the shelter she used to stay at. She never asked for any of it, but she made sure it went to people who needed it more than she did now. One day, while practicing at the center, she overheard two teachers talking. That girl, one said, she's got something special. Not just talent, heart. And that's harder to teach, she didn't tell them she heard. But it stayed with her. As the months passed, she began to dream bigger. Not of fame or stages, but of teaching, of helping kids like her. The ones who carry music in their bones but have no place to let it out. She started volunteering at the shelter on weekends, showing kids how to make rhythms with buckets, how to sing in harmony, how to find joy even when life is hard. And every Thursday, without fail, she returned to the restaurant, not because she needed a meal, but because it was where she'd been seen for the first time in a long time. The staff treated her like family now. The dishwasher taught her how to make perfect pasta water. The hostess saved her favorite table by the window. And the owner? He'd started keeping a small notebook where he wrote down song titles she played, just so he could remember them. One evening, as she packed up after practice, he handed her a thick envelope. "Open it later," he said. That night, alone in her room, she did. Inside was a letter and a check. The letter read, "You gave us a gift that night. Let us give you one back. This is for your education, for your future, for every song you haven't played yet." The amount was more than she'd ever held in her hands. But what moved her most wasn't the number. It was the trust behind it. She didn't spend it on clothes or gadgets. She opened a savings account, started planning for next year's tuition, and she wrote a thank you note. Not long, just honest. "You didn't just feed me that night. You gave me back my voice." Outside, the city kept moving, cars honking, people rushing, life going on as usual. But inside her, something had settled, not because everything was perfect, but because she finally believed she belonged. And that belief, it changed everything. A year after that rainy night, the restaurant looked the same. Same warm lights, same smell of garlic and rosemary, same grand piano gleaming in the corner. But tonight the chairs were arranged differently. Not in dining clusters, but in neat rows facing the piano. Small programs lay on each seat, printed on simple cream paper. At the top, in elegant script, "An evening of music and memory." Below it, just one name. She stood backstage, well, not really backstage, just behind the kitchen door, wearing a simple black dress, hair pulled back, hands clasped to keep them from shaking. Not from fear, from fullness. Her heart felt so full it might spill over. The owner peeked in. "You ready?" She nodded. "I think so," he smiled. They'd been waiting since 6. She took a breath and walked out. The room was packed. Not with critics or celebrities, but with people who'd been part of her journey. The retired teacher who'd become her guardian. The dishwasher who'd taught her to cook pasta. The little boy who'd drawn her that picture. The woman who'd given her a coat. Even the couple who'd stopped arguing that first night and now held hands at table 3. And in the very back, near the door, sat the man who'd said yes when she asked for 5 minutes. She sat at the piano. The wood was smooth under her palms, the keys familiar as her own breath. She didn't look at the crowd. She closed her eyes and let the quiet settle around her. Then she began. Not with a famous piece. Not with something flashy. She played the song she'd written herself, for Mom and for the night I was heard. It started with the same simple melody from that rainy evening, but now it had grown. New phrases wove through it, notes of hope, of struggle, of gratitude. Her fingers moved with confidence now, not because she was perfect, but because she knew this music came from truth. Halfway through, she added a harmony her teacher had shown her, something soft and rising like dawn after a long night. And in the silence between phrases, you could hear people breathing, hearts beating, tears falling. When she finished, the room didn't erupt in wild applause. It stayed still for a long moment, like everyone was holding the music inside them, not wanting to let it go too soon. Then slowly they rose, not out of obligation but out of respect, out of love. Afterward, she didn't give a speech. She just stood, looked out at the faces and said, "Thank you for listening." That was enough. Later, as guests milled about, sharing stories and sipping coffee, the owner found her near the piano. "You played like someone who's found her home," he said. She smiled. "I have." But her story didn't end with a spotlight or a record deal. It ended, like most real stories do, with quiet steps forward. She kept going to school, kept practicing, started teaching weekend classes at the community music center for kids who couldn't afford lessons. She didn't call herself a teacher. She just said, "I'll show you what I know." The shelter where she'd once slept now had a small music room, thanks to donations inspired by her story. Every Tuesday she went there to play with the kids, showing them how to turn buckets into drums, how to sing in rounds, how to find joy even when the world feels heavy. And every Thursday, she still came to the restaurant, not to perform, but to practice. Sometimes people would stop by just to listen. Sometimes no one came at all. But she played anyway because the music wasn't for them anymore. It was for her mom, for the girl she used to be, shivering in the rain, who just needed someone to say yes. One spring afternoon, as she packed up after practice, the little boy who'd given her the drawing ran in with his mother. "I learned Claire de Lune," he announced proudly. "Can I play it for you?" She moved to the bench and let him sit. His fingers were small, his timing off, but his heart was in every note. When he finished, beaming, she said, "You played it like you meant it. That's the most important part." He hugged her before leaving, and in that moment she realized something. She wasn't just healing herself anymore. She was helping others find their own music. Years later, people in the neighborhood would talk about that night. The night a hungry girl walked into a restaurant and changed everything with 5 minutes of honesty. But those who knew her best knew the real story wasn't about that one performance. It was about all the small choices that came after. Showing up, staying kind, giving back, believing that beauty could grow even in broken places. The restaurant still hosts music nights. The piano still gleams. And sometimes, if you listen closely on a quiet Thursday afternoon, you can hear two melodies blending together, one young, one remembered, like a conversation across time. Because the truth is, no one saves anyone else, but sometimes, one person saying yes gives another the courage to keep going. And sometimes, a single song can feed more than just a body. It can feed a soul. It can rebuild a life. It can remind us all that even in the darkest rain, there's always a note of light waiting to be played.